Former President Trump is back in court in Lower Manhattan for his civil fraud trial as it enters its third week. The former president spoke before entering the courtroom today. Trump's former attorney, Michael Cohen, postponed his testimony today, saying he needed to attend to a health problem. Last month, the judge ruled Trump repeatedly committed fraud and misrepresented his own wealth by billions. The New York Attorney General is seeking $250 million in penalties. Trump denies all claims against him.
Okay, so something absolutely explosive just happened in a federal courtroom, and I need to tell you about it right now, because this might be one of the most damaging developments for Trump in his entire presidency, and that is really saying something, considering everything we have been covering over the past several months on this channel about his legal problems. A federal judge just unsealed a batch of evidence that Trump's legal team had been desperately, and I mean desperately, trying to keep hidden from the public and from Congress and from anyone who might hold him accountable for what is contained in those documents. These were not ordinary court filings or routine legal documents that get sealed for procedural reasons that nobody actually cares about. These were explosive materials, including private meeting transcripts and financial records and communications that allegedly show illegal security directives surrounding January 6th, when the Capitol was attacked by a violent mob. And now the whole world gets to see what Trump was trying so hard to hide from everyone who might use it against him in court or in the public arena. Can you believe this? Like, Trump's lawyers fought tooth and nail to keep these documents under seal, where nobody could ever read them or report on what they contained or use them as evidence in ongoing investigations against him. They filed motion after motion arguing that releasing this information would somehow harm national security or violate executive privilege or whatever other excuse they could come up with to justify keeping the public in the dark about what was really going on behind closed doors during one of the most dangerous periods in American history. And Judge Marianne Keller looked at all of their arguments carefully and considered everything they presented and basically said, no, the public has a right to know what is in these documents. And I am ordering them unsealed immediately so everyone can see what you have been hiding all this time from investigators and from the American people. That is a sitting federal judge telling the President of the United States directly that his attempts to keep damaging information secret have completely failed, and that transparency is going to win out over his desire to cover things up. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video. The materials that were unsealed on November 13th include some truly stunning stuff that is going to fuel investigations and headlines for weeks and months to come as people dig through everything and figure out what it all means for Trump and for everyone around him who was involved. There are transcripts of communications between Trump's advisors and legislative staff that suggest directives may have been given that violated security protocols on January 6th when the Capitol was attacked by a mob trying to overturn the election results and stop the certification of Biden's victory.
Some breaking news this afternoon. A New York judge ruling that Donald Trump, Don Jr., and Ivanka must testify under oath. They were subpoenaed as part of New York Attorney General Letitia James' civil investigation into the Trump family's business dealings. NBC News correspondent for investigations, Tom Winter, joining me now with this breaking news. Tom, this is just in. Tell us more about the judge's ruling. What did he say here?
First off, the mechanics of this, Allison. So it is possible to appeal this, the New York State appellate decision. Okay. You can expect the Trumps to do so. You can expect them to seek a stay. In other words, kind of delay these depositions until they've heard that. Back to the news and the reason why we're here. The former president has been ordered and must sit for a deposition.
There are extensive financial records tied to Trump's political operation that raise serious questions about where money was going and what it was being used for instead of what donors thought they were funding when they gave their hard-earned cash. There are internal communications that show what people around Trump were saying privately while publicly claiming everything was fine and there was nothing to worry about and that Trump had done nothing wrong. This is a treasure trove of evidence that prosecutors and congressional investigators are going to be poring over for a very long time, trying to understand every detail. The sheer volume of what was unsealed has stunned legal observers who have been following Trump's cases for years and thought they had seen everything at this point after all the scandals and revelations that have come out over the years. This is not just one smoking gun document that proves one specific thing. This is boxes and boxes worth of material that paints a comprehensive picture of what was happening behind closed doors during one of the most dangerous periods in American history when our democracy was literally under attack. and Trump did not want any of it to see the light of day, which tells you everything you need to know about how damaging he knew this information would be if it ever became public. Innocent people do not fight this hard to keep evidence hidden from view. People who have nothing to hide do not file emergency motions begging courts to keep documents sealed forever where nobody can ever read them or use them as evidence. Congressional reaction has been immediate and intense, with lawmakers demanding emergency actions and calling for immediate accountability now that they can finally see what was being kept from them and from the American people for so long while Trump tried to run out the clock. Members of Congress are saying they want arrests of people named in the documents who may have committed crimes. They want hearings to examine everything that was revealed in these materials. They want answers about why this information was hidden for so long and what it reveals about Trump's conduct during and after January 6th when our democracy was under siege. The pressure on Trump just increased dramatically because now there is actual documentary evidence that the public can see, not just allegations or speculation or anonymous sources, but actual documents that show what was happening in black and white for everyone to read. All right, so let me really break down what happened here and why this unsealing is such a massive deal for Trump and for everyone who has been waiting for accountability for the events surrounding January 6th and the broader pattern of alleged misconduct throughout Trump's time in office that we have been documenting. This is not just about one court ruling or one batch of documents that got released to the public. This is about the collapse of a secrecy strategy that Trump has been relying on for years to keep the most damaging information about his conduct away from public view and away from prosecutors and investigators who could use it against him in court and in the political arena where it could damage his support. Let me start with what was actually in these sealed documents, because understanding the contents helps explain why Trump fought so hard to keep them hidden, and why their release is causing such a massive reaction from Congress and from legal observers who have been following these cases closely for years now. The materials include transcripts from private meetings where Trump's advisors were discussing security arrangements, or the lack thereof, surrounding January 6th when Congress was meeting to certify the election results that Trump had lost. These transcripts allegedly show communications that suggest directives were given that may have violated established security protocols that were supposed to protect the Capitol and the people inside it from exactly the kind of attack that ended up happening that day. In other words, there may be evidence that people around Trump were involved in decisions that left the Capitol vulnerable to attack, and they knew exactly what they were doing when they made those decisions that had such catastrophic consequences. Think about what that means for a second, and let it really sink in, because this is incredibly significant if the documents show what initial reports are suggesting they show. If these transcripts reveal what initial reports suggest they reveal, then we are not just talking about Trump failing to act during the attack or being slow to respond to what was happening at the Capitol. We are talking about potential evidence that people in his orbit may have deliberately undermined security in ways that made the attack possible or more successful than it otherwise would have been if proper protocols had been followed. That is a completely different level of culpability than anything that has been proven before in any court or investigation into the events of that day. And that is exactly why Trump wanted these documents to stay sealed forever, where nobody could ever see them or use them as evidence against him or anyone else who might be implicated. The financial records that were unsealed are also incredibly significant because they show money flows that raise serious questions about what Trump's political operation was doing with funds it raised, and where that money was actually going instead of where donors thought it was going when they contributed. We have heard for years about concerns that Trump was raising money for things like legal defense funds or election challenges, and then using that money for other purposes that donors did not know about or approve of when they gave their money, thinking it would be used for something else entirely. These financial records may provide documentary proof of exactly how money was being moved around and what it was being used for, which could fuel investigations into potential fraud or misrepresentation to donors who thought their money was going somewhere else entirely and would be furious if they found out the truth. The internal communications that were released show what people around Trump were saying privately, while presenting a very different face to the public and to investigators who were asking questions about what happened. This is important because it goes to the question of intent and knowledge, which are crucial elements in proving criminal liability in any case. If people were saying one thing publicly, like that everything was fine and there was no plan to do anything improper or illegal, while privately communicating something very different that contradicted their public statements, that is evidence of potential deception and cover-up that prosecutors can use to establish criminal intent in court. These communications strip away the plausible deniability that Trump and his allies have been hiding behind for years whenever questions came up about their conduct and what they really knew. Judge Marianne Keller's decision to unseal these materials over the objections of Trump's legal team represents a significant judicial statement about transparency and the public's right to know what their government is doing, especially when there are allegations of serious misconduct involved that go to the heart of our democracy. Trump's lawyers argued that these documents should stay sealed for various reasons: national security concerns, executive privilege claims, the need to protect ongoing investigations from interference by public disclosure. And the judge rejected all of those arguments completely and said the public interest in disclosure outweighs whatever interest Trump has in keeping this information secret from everyone who might want to see it. That is a powerful statement from the bench that signals courts are not going to let Trump hide behind legal technicalities forever, no matter how hard his lawyers try to make that happen. The timing of this unsealing is also significant because it comes at a moment when Trump is already facing an unprecedented wave of legal defeats on multiple fronts that we have been covering extensively on this channel for months now. His immunity claims are failing in court after court across the country. His executive orders are being struck down as unconstitutional overreach by judges who refuse to let him govern by decree. His appointees are being disqualified from serving in positions he tried to install them in without proper authority. And now his attempts to keep evidence sealed are failing too, just like everything else. Every legal strategy he has relied on throughout his career is crumbling. And this unsealing is just the latest example of courts refusing to give him the protection he is seeking from accountability for his actions. Congressional reaction to the unsealing has been intense and immediate, with lawmakers from both parties demanding action now that they can finally see what was being hidden from them and from the American people for so long. Democrats are calling for emergency hearings to examine the contents of the documents and determine what additional actions need to be taken based on what they reveal about Trump's conduct. Some are calling for arrests of individuals named in the documents if the evidence supports criminal charges being filed against them. Even some Republicans are expressing concern about what the documents reveal, though they are being more cautious about what consequences should follow and whether action is really necessary. The political pressure on Trump just increased dramatically across the board from all directions. What makes this particularly damaging for Trump is that these are not allegations or accusations from political opponents who might have ulterior motives for making things up. These are actual documents, transcripts, and financial records and communications that speak for themselves without any spin or interpretation needed. You cannot dismiss documentary evidence as fake news or a witch hunt the way you can dismiss testimony or allegations from people who might have reasons to lie about what happened. The documents say what they say in black and white, and now everyone can read them and draw their own conclusions about what they reveal about Trump's conduct without having to rely on what anyone else tells them about the contents. Trump's response to this unsealing has been entirely predictable, attacking the judge as biased and unfair, claiming the documents are being misrepresented by his enemies in the media and in Congress, insisting that he did nothing wrong and this is all just another attempt to persecute him unfairly like everything else. But those attacks ring hollow when people can actually read the documents themselves and see what they contain with their own eyes without any filter. The documents are public now for everyone to examine. The spin cannot change what they actually say on the page, no matter how hard Trump tries to convince people otherwise. Okay, so let us break this down into the key points you need to understand, because this is a complicated story with a lot of implications, and I want to make sure you walk away from this video knowing exactly what happened and why it matters so much for Trump's presidency and for the broader question of accountability for January 6th and related misconduct that we have been following closely. Point number 1, a federal judge unsealed a massive batch of evidence on November 13th that Trump's legal team had desperately tried to keep hidden from the public and from investigators, including transcripts of private meetings and financial records and internal communications that allegedly show potential illegal directives related to January 6th security failures that left the Capitol vulnerable to attack. This was not a routine unsealing of minor procedural documents that nobody would care about or pay attention to. This was the release of material that Trump clearly considered so damaging that he was willing to fight in court to keep it secret forever, no matter what it took or how many motions his lawyers had to file. The fact that a judge overruled his objections and ordered the documents released tells you that the legal arguments for keeping them sealed were not persuasive, and that the public interest in transparency outweighed Trump's interest in secrecy. Point number 2. The unsealed materials allegedly include communications between Trump's advisors and legislative staff suggesting directives that may have violated security protocols on January 6th, which could be evidence of deliberate action to undermine Capitol security rather than just negligence or slow response to an evolving situation that got out of control. If these documents show what initial reports suggest, This is a game changer in terms of understanding what happened on January 6th and who bears responsibility for the security failures that allowed the attack to succeed the way it did, with such devastating consequences. We have heard for years about the security breakdown that day without fully understanding why it happened. Now, there may be documentary evidence about why that breakdown happened and who was involved in decisions that left the Capitol vulnerable to the attack. Point number 3. The sheer volume of evidence that was unsealed, including extensive financial records and internal communications, has stunned legal observers and intensified congressional demands for immediate action, including potential arrests and emergency hearings to examine everything that was revealed. This is not one document or one piece of evidence that proves one specific thing. This is a comprehensive record that will take investigators weeks or months to fully analyze and understand in all of its complexity. Every page potentially contains new information that could fuel additional investigations or provide evidence for existing cases against Trump and his allies. The scope of what was released suggests that what Trump was hiding was much more extensive than anyone previously realized. Point number 4. This unsealing represents another major failure of Trump's legal strategy of delay and secrecy. Following his pattern of losing court battles on immunity claims and executive orders and other attempts to shield himself from accountability throughout his second term. Trump has consistently tried to use legal maneuvers to keep damaging information hidden and to delay any reckoning for his conduct for as long as humanly possible. And those strategies keep failing as judges refuse to grant him the special treatment he is seeking from the courts. The unsealing is just the latest example of courts saying that Trump is not above the law and that the normal rules of transparency and accountability apply to him just like everyone else. Point number 5. Congressional reaction has been immediate and intense, with lawmakers demanding emergency actions and accountability now that they can see what was being hidden, putting enormous political pressure on Trump at a moment when he is already facing unprecedented legal challenges on multiple fronts simultaneously. The documents give Congress new ammunition for investigations and oversight of the executive branch. They give prosecutors new evidence for potential charges that could be filed. And they give the public new information to evaluate Trump's conduct and decide for themselves what they think happened. So, what happens next, and where does this story go from here now that these documents are public and everyone can see what Trump was trying to hide from the American people? The immediate next steps will involve investigators and journalists and congressional staff going through the documents page by page to understand exactly what they contain and what they reveal about Trump's conduct during this critical period in American history. We will see hearings where lawmakers ask questions based on what the documents show. We will see legal analysis of whether the evidence supports additional charges or strengthens existing cases. And we will see political fallout as Trump's opponents use the documents to argue for accountability while his defenders try to minimize what they reveal. The legal implications could be significant if prosecutors determine that the documents provide evidence of crimes that have not yet been charged against Trump or anyone in his orbit. The financial records could support fraud charges if they show money was misused or donors were deceived about where their contributions were going. The communications could support obstruction charges if they show efforts to hide evidence or mislead investigators about what really happened. And the January 6th materials could support charges related to the security failures if they show deliberate action rather than mere negligence. For Trump personally, this unsealing is devastating because it strips away the secrecy he was counting on to protect himself from accountability for his actions. You cannot hide behind sealed documents when those documents are no longer sealed and everyone can read them. You cannot claim there is no evidence when the evidence is now public for all to see. And you cannot dismiss investigations as baseless when investigators now have documentary proof of what you were doing. For the country, this is an important moment for accountability and transparency in government that will have lasting implications. The public now has access to information that powerful people tried very hard to keep hidden from view. Congressional investigators now have evidence they need to conduct meaningful oversight of the executive branch, and the principle that nobody, not even the president, is above the law is being reinforced by courts that refuse to let Trump hide. The political implications are significant as we head toward the midterms next year when voters will decide the future of Congress. These documents will fuel Democratic arguments that Trump engaged in serious misconduct that demands accountability. Republicans will have to decide whether to defend Trump or distance themselves from what the documents reveal, and voters will have new information to consider when making their choices. This story is going to dominate headlines for weeks as people dig through the documents and discover new details about what Trump was hiding. There will be bombshell after bombshell as specific communications and records are analyzed and reported on by journalists and investigators. And through all of it, The fundamental question will be whether Trump will finally face real consequences for his conduct or escape accountability once again. Based on how things have been going, with court after court ruling against him on every major issue, the walls are closing in faster than ever before. The unsealing of these documents is just the latest sign that Trump's ability to hide from accountability is collapsing completely. Keep watching because this story is developing rapidly, and there will be much more to cover. I will see you in the next one.